What's up everyone, we're back once again with another Twitch stream recap. I've been a bit lacking on it, to be honest, but look at back with vengeance. And this week we're looking at my redraw of the cover of In the Sign of Evil by German Thrash slash black metal dudes, Sodom. So yeah, this is they were formed in 1981. And by Tom Angelripper, who is the bassist and vocalist, and he's actually also the only original member remaining in the band, because they've had a lot of different lineup changes over the years, but he's been the main driving force, the sort of mainstay behind the band, behind the name. Sodom have been referred to, and are sort of still kind of, I guess, back in the classical days of part of the Big Four, but of the German thrash band. So they're sitting alongside Kreator, Destruction, and Tankard, who's the other sort of one. So that's kind of interesting, and it's kind of cool. You know, you hear a lot about Big Four, you know, Megadeth, Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax, all that kind of stuff. You know, you always hear about that American side of it, so it's kind of cool that there's like a Big Four of like German stuff. I'm sure there's others, but yeah, no, I thought that was really cool. So the band is actually named after a Venom song called 1000 Days in Sodom. So it's not named after something else that you might think, so get your mind out of the gutter, alright? It's Venom reference. Solid Venom reference. So In the Sign of Evil was actually released in October 1984 and is regarded as an important thrash slash black metal release because the thrash influence of what was going on, but also like the black metal stuff from like Venom and stuff like that. Early first wave black metal, I guess. And so actually, yeah, so people also sort of consider this album, well, it's kind of like an EP, as part of the first wave of black metal, which is coming off influences of things like Venom and of course Bathory, can't forget. Definitely hear that when you listen to it. It's sort of got that middle ground where it's not like super tech, but it's also not really leaning into the like hardcore super lo-fi sound that we kind of know from like golden era, if you can call it, charcoal era of black metal. So this is a little bit different from the other album covers I've drawn for the other ones, because it's not an album. It's an EP, so it only really had 5 songs. There's been some other versions and stuff like that. It was actually re-released with Obsessed with Cruelty, which is the release they did after this. So they released these two sort of together, and that was in 1989. I think it was the first time they did that. So that's kind of cool that you can get sort of 2 releases with songs from around the same era together to kind of create an album, as opposed to having 2 different EPs. Nothing really wrong with that. But the cover itself and the songs and the sound is like super duper iconic, especially when you consider the European influence of thrash and black metal as opposed to the American influence stuff. Everyone knows this cover. I mean, part of the reason why I picked it is it's iconic, you know it straight away, but it's also kind of cool. I thought it'd be fun to redraw. So 2 songs, notably Outbreak of Evil and The Blasphemer, are still crowd favorites, and they actually continue to play them live some 35 years later after they were written and recorded. Pretty good track record. If people are still wanting you to play the same songs 35 years later, you're doing something right. You know, like you're hitting the right notes, pun intended. So many of the earlier songs from Sodom actually focused on satanic and evil themes, but as the band progressed and evolved their lyrics, songwriting, they covered a lot of different topics, so things like war, politics, fascism, and that is sort of more analogous when you consider the thrash influence, because a lot of thrash stuff is a little bit more on a sort of socio-political kind of angle, whereas black metal is more the satanic blasphemy kind of in a way like sort of fantasy elements with a lot of Lord of the Rings influence and shit like that. So that's kind of cool, and you can see that in the reflection of some of the other album covers as they go on in their career. You know, like another of my favorite is Agent Orange, which is obviously the name is referencing Vietnam War, but then also there's like soldiers in a helicopter, and then there's like, you know, I saw something recently when they had this guy, the executioner guy, fighting the soldier kind of guy, the Sodom soldier guy. So it's kind of cool that they sort of embrace that, you know, sort of change or that evolution of the band. Not a lot of metal bands really evolve. You can kind of say, like, they have a sound, they develop it a little bit, and they stick to it. It's not something that's typically done in metal, unless you're someone like Mastodon, you know what I mean? It's not really like a big thing. But yeah, that's a first release from Sodom, so it's not like a super, you know, in-depth kind of thing to talk about, but definitely set the tone for what they're doing musically, and also what was going on at the time, you know, with other bands like, obviously everyone knows Kreator and Destruction, stuff like that. To be part of that is pretty cool, and to be pretty groundbreaking, and to still have like fans that want to hear the same songs like 35 years later. That's awesome. The reason I kind of picked this cover to do was they're kind of my sort of philosophy on picking these covers was I didn't really want to recreate something like specifically exactly, but if anything was super kind of more like a piece of art or an illustration, I didn't really want to do that either. This is kind of a simple, well, in a way deceptively simple cover, because you've got a guy, he's holding a sword, he's got the executioner hood, but the actual pose and how much you see of his body and his hand and kind of stuff is a little bit obscured. It's quite well painted, but there's not a lot there, so I thought there would be a little bit of room to kind of give it a little bit more of emotion, sort of like enhance that kind of pose. You could see earlier on I was trying out some different angles with how his body was moving, so I kind of took the angle of, you know, he's sort of almost charging towards you, so he's got his left leg kind of, you can see there, coming out in front, and his right leg going back behind like he's in mid-stride. His right shoulder with his right arm holding the sword is jutting forward, so there's a lot of what they call contrapposto, so opposing angles within the pose, within the body frame. Also his hood is kind of swinging a little bit, so that kind of gives the interpretation that he's moving, you know, that to show that he's moving forward and the hood is sort of blowing back as he's charging forward with the sword. Like a lot of the other ones, I kept it pretty loose, pretty rough. So this is actually, what we're seeing now is like the ink, you know, almost like the final outline stage. But it's still pretty rough because I kind of wanted to keep it moving, do these pretty quickly, kind of knock them over in one sitting, which typically lasted about 3.5 hours. But I also wanted to try and push myself to get looser, to try and capture things, not so much detail, but capture the essence of what it is I'm doing quicker, and have a bit more life to it, instead of trying to make like the perfect line and redoing it 5 or 6 times. Really just slamming stuff in there, just like big chunks of black, and using some sketchy lines and things like that to denote form, denote the, sort of the construction. I think here, I'm going to redraw a little bit of his clothing instead of the pose as well. You can see as well that I'm referencing the sketch underneath. I keep pulling it back and forward because I was kind of happy with the looseness and the general pose as it were when I did the sketch, and then doing the final inks, kind of referring to that to make sure I don't get lost, because sometimes when you're inking it can be a different mindset. You can be thinking about like, I'm just trying to put blacks where they need to be. You're not necessarily thinking, oh, this line is the top of the arm, or this line is the belt, or the tunic folding over the belt but part of it. You know what I mean? It kind of gets a little bit lost in your thinking because you get bogged down into looking at the details. Well, when you're doing a sketch, you don't care. Circle for the head, line for the shoulders, that'll do. And that helps preserve the movement of the pose, the sort of the life of the figure, or whatever it is you're drawing, because you're not concerned with other things. Whereas when you get to that inking stage, you're like, I'm trying to put heavy lines down or denote this and that. You can get a bit bogged down in looking just at what you're doing and not really taking into account the overall composition or the pose or the way the body's moving. So it's important for me, and it kind of makes it a bit easier in a way when you're referring back to something that that works, the underdrawing, the sketch or something, to help you when you're doing things like hard outlines or shadows, like heavy blacks and stuff, because that'll just help you understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it in that area. Another thing that I kind of like to do as well, you kind of see it as I go on now, I'm starting to layer in colors and layer in different tones of grey to sort of bring things out and throw things back, is that I'll go back. So even now I'm adding in extra texture for darker areas to sort of push them back and help bring the things like the hand forward, or the scarf, shadowing on the side of his face, all that kind of stuff. I will go in and I will remove outlines where things like highlights or hard light is hitting the side of something. So you can kind of see at the top right, now I'm doing some white in there for the background, where there's an outline that sort of shows where the red hood kind of ends on the outside, but there'll be light hitting it. I think I actually go in a little bit later and actually remove some of those outlines to help give it a bit of depth, because when you think about it, if you got a bit of light hitting something, why would you have a big thick black outline there? You know what I mean? It sort of makes it really flat. If you cut away some of that outline, then it helps to sort of feel like it's a little bit more 3D, that you're describing, the curve of this thing, or the fact that the light is hitting it. That actually helps give it a bit more depth, instead of making everything so flat. So you can see there at the top, I've removed some of the outlines on the top of the execution hood, and it actually gives it a bit more variation in line, in kind of describing that area. Just going through now and plugging in the Old English, as same kind of thing as the actual drawing itself. Just getting in there, super rough, super quick. Wanted to keep it expressive, wanted to keep it a little bit messy, to sort of make sure it was all going to go together. I didn't really want to do anything too perfect or too clean, just so it had the same kind of feel across everything. Bringing some red in across stuff. Pretty sure there wasn't a whole lot of extra blood on the original album cover, but it kind of helps to bring it across, so it's not isolated just on that right hand side or just in the hood. I did change the colors up from the original album, because it had some more blue and things like that, whereas with the series, I'm trying to use the same color palette for each one so that they all sit together better. I've done that before with the Halloween thing, and so even though removing the blue and things like that makes it not as exactly like the original source material, the red obviously is the biggest draw card, so using that on the hood, but also bringing it across into some other pieces, like a bit of blood splattered around on the sword, on the hand, just helps tie it all together instead of having it localized in one area. That was pretty cool actually, just all red red and black. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's just me talking away in the background there. Yeah, so this is the final one. You can see it on Instagram, you can see it on my ArtStation, all that kind of stuff. It's definitely cool. Pretty happy with it came out. It's a nice little fun one to do. I still got a couple more to pump out, but they'll be done as soon as I can, and you'll get to see all of the process for all of them. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time. Peace.